Hello, all you freedom-loving people. RFK Jr. is moving ahead with the studies to reveal the environmental causes of the autism increases, and the leveling of the trade environment continues with President Trump meeting with world leaders. Okay, let's get into it. Gold futures rose to a record high of more than $3,350 an ounce on Wednesday afternoon. Analysts stated the next milestone for the gold price is $3,500, which is expected to come soon. Gold prices have soared more than 25% since the start of the year, so some people are worried about the economic and market turbulence brought about by the trade tensions between the United States and China. On Monday, a UBS analyst wrote, "The case for adding gold allocations has become more compelling than ever in this environment of escalating tariff uncertainty, weaker growth, higher inflation, geopolitical risks, and diversification away from U.S. assets and the U.S. dollar." On Tuesday, President Trump unveiled his newest tariff policy, ordering the opening of 232 investigations into all imports of key U.S. minerals and other goods. This is clearly paving the way for potential new tariffs. The U.S. has already taken in more than $21 billion since the start of the second Trump administration, even with the 90-day moratorium. And with the U.S. dollar at a near three-year low, this has pushed gold higher, making it a more attractive investment for holders of other currencies. And there are several reasons to expect the recent gold run-up to persist, according to the World Gold Council. First, central banks have been a major driver of gold demand over the past few years with the incoming requirement under ISO 2022. The geopolitical and economic uncertainty for Europe and Asia is likely to remain elevated as the White House's 90-day tariff moratorium draws to a close. Of course, another possible outcome would be a tariff agreement between the U.S. and most countries within 90 days. Then there would be no economic uncertainty. The geopolitical uncertainty would then be predictable. On Wednesday, the U.S. and Japan began tariff talks. Before the negotiations, Japan released different signals. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba said on Monday that as a close U.S. ally, Japan will not rush to reach an agreement and does not intend to make major concessions. Earlier, Japan also ruled out the possibility of selling its huge amount of U.S. treasuries as a bargaining chip in bilateral trade talks. Japan is the largest holder of U.S. debt outside the U.S., according to the U.S. Treasury Department. Japan's chief trade negotiator is Economic Revitalization Minister Raisai Akazawa. Before leaving the United States, he said that Japan would like to convince the United States by promising to expand its investment in the United States, so the two countries could realize a win-win situation without tariffs. The original U.S. representatives to the talks were to be led by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. But on Wednesday morning, President Trump unexpectedly announced that he would personally participate in tariff talks with Japanese officials. That's a sign of the importance he placed on the talks. President Trump wrote on True Social, "Hopefully something can be worked out which is great for Japan and the USA." Afterward, he posted, "A great honor to have just met with the Japanese delegation on trade. Big progress." But President Trump did not disclose any details of the talks. Japan's chief negotiator did not disclose any details of the talks either in an interview with reporters, but he noted that the two sides had agreed to hold a second meeting later this month. President Trump indicated that reaching an agreement with Japan is a matter of urgency. Akazawa originally planned to limit the talks to trade and investment issues, and Bessent had earlier said that he wanted an agreement covering tariffs, non-tariff barriers, and the exchange rate, but Japan prefers to keep the exchange rate separate. However, President Trump has indicated that he also wants to discuss how much the Japanese contribute to the cost of U.S. troops who are stationed in Japan, largely as a deterrent to China. The largest U.S. military deployment overseas is in Japan. So President Trump's demand for more defense spending concerns the Japanese government. Japan was one of the first countries to start face-to-face negotiations. Bessent also met with the Vice Prime Minister of Vietnam last week to discuss trade issues. He also invited South Korea's finance minister to the U.S. next week. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni met with President Trump today at the White House to discuss tariffs. During the meeting, both leaders signaled that a trade deal will emerge with the European Union, and Meloni is expected to play a significant role in calming trade tensions between the United States and the European Union.
I'm sure we can make a deal, and I'm here to help on that. I cannot deal in the name of the European Union. My goal would be invite President Trump to pay an official visit to Italy and understand if there's a possibility when he comes to organize also such a meeting with Europe. I think the best way is that we simply speak frankly about the needs that every one of us has and find ourselves in the middle. That's useful for all. Somebody calls me such a Western nationalism. I don't know if it is the right word, but I'm sure that together we are stronger. And I have to find a way. I'm here to find the best way to make us both stronger on the two shores of the Atlantic.
President Trump also dismissed concerns about China's escalation of tariffs against the United States and their attempts to win over trade partners in the ongoing trade dispute.
You aren't worried about allies growing closer to China as a result of your tariffs. And this week we saw Chinese President Xi Jinping visit with 3 of our allies. Should you be worried that they're growing closer?
No.
Mr. President, will you pick up the phone and...
Nobody can compete with us. Nobody.
You said that you have a good relationship with President Xi. Why not pick up the phone and call him and make a deal?
Well, we're going to make a deal. We'll have a deal. I think we're going to make a very good deal with China.
Do you plan to reach out to him and call him?
I think that you will see we'll make a very good deal with China.
Of course, China faces the highest tariffs, so Beijing can't afford to not have a dialogue with Washington. According to Bloomberg, Beijing has recently released its willingness to talk, but has also set out a number of preconditions. The preconditions include the hope that the U.S. management of speech is more prudent to maintain consistency in policy. Beijing also hopes that President Trump will explicitly appoint a special envoy with presidential authorization to talk. Although the overall goal of the U.S.-China relationship are not yet fully disclosed, Besant believes that if talks are resumed in the future, it should be done with the direct involvement of Presidents Trump and Xi Jinping. But the Chinese side seems to be taking a more conservative approach. They only want to arrange high-level meetings between Presidents Trump and Xi Jinping after a concrete agreement has been reached. This is because the top leaders of the CCP are experts in power struggles, but they do not have expertise in any specific industry, and they often do not understand economics, therefore they cannot negotiate tariffs independently. On Wednesday, California Governor Gavin Newsom and State Attorney General Rob Bonta announced the filing of a lawsuit to try and block President Trump's global reciprocal tariffs. In a press conference, Newsom's office said that the lawsuit argues that President Trump should seek congressional approval to take such economically significant actions. In announcing the global reciprocal tariffs, President Trump cited the International Economic Emergency Powers Act of 1977, which allows the U.S. president to impose tariffs on trading partners immediately during a national emergency. That's why President Trump declared a national economic emergency on the same day. President Trump has explained that the United States is being treated unfairly by foreign countries. They put up trade barriers that make U.S.-made goods unattractive and uncompetitive. The U.S. trade deficit reached a record high of $1.2 trillion in 2024. California is actually the 5th largest economy in the world. The Port of Los Angeles, which is the busiest port in the United States, is particularly vulnerable to the slowdown in trade with China. Moreover, California's major industries, from Silicon Valley to agriculture, are heavily dependent on global trade, so the state of California will lose billions of dollars from the tariffs. Newsom said in a statement, President Trump's unlawful tariffs are wreaking chaos on California families, businesses, and our economy, driving up prices and threatening jobs. We're standing up for American families who can't afford to let the chaos continue. The California governor believes that the tariffs will lead to unemployment and higher prices, at least in California. Earlier this week, the Liberty Justice Center, which represented 5 U.S. small businesses in a lawsuit filed in the U.S. Court of International Trade, arguing that the International Economic Emergency Powers Act should only be triggered in the face of an unusual and extraordinary threat. They stated that the U.S. trade deficit is neither an emergency or an unusual or extraordinary threat. However, the threat of the U.S. government going bankrupt is seen by Elon Musk and others as an emergency and extraordinary threat. The White House has moved to further regulate the media. On Tuesday, the White House announced that news agencies, including Reuters and Bloomberg, will no longer hold a permanent slot in the small pool of reporters who cover President Trump. The pool typically consists of around 10 outlets that follow the president wherever he goes, whether it is a meeting in the Oval Office where he makes statements or answers questions, or trips at home or abroad. In comparison to most media, these outlets in the pool typically cover presidential and White House events more closely than most on a daily basis. Other media, especially local news organizations that do not have a presence in Washington, D.C., rely on these outlets for up-to-the-minute stories, videos, and audio. Prior to the current Trump administration, the Associated Press, Bloomberg, and Reuters were all ex-official members of this press corps. But now it's no longer a given that the wire services have a place in the press pool, which rotates with about 30 other newspapers and print media. This may have something to do with the fact that Reuters recently reported some falsehoods. According to guidance provided to Reuters by a White House official on Tuesday, Leavitt will have the discretion to determine the members of the pool on a daily basis to ensure that the president's message reaches targeted audiences and that outlets with applicable subject matter expertise are present as events warrant. Reuters has expressed its displeasure at this action. A Reuters spokesperson said any steps by the U.S. government to limit access to the president threatens that principle both for the public and the world's media, and Bloomberg did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The White House said that outlets will be eligible to be included in the pool irrespective of the substantive viewpoint expressed by an outlet. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced on Wednesday that autism diagnoses in U.S. children are increasing at an alarming rate. He revealed that 1 in 31 American children are now diagnosed with autism. For boys, the numbers are 1 in 20. And in California, where data tracking is regarded as one of the most thorough in the country, the rate may be as high as 1 in 12.5 boys. According to Kennedy, that figure likely reflects a national trend. Kennedy points out that the incidence of autism has risen nearly 5-fold in just 30 years. At the time, the 1992 Autism and Developmental Disabilities Monitoring ADDM report proved that the prevalence of autism was 1 in 150 at that time.
In 1987, there was another exhaustive study, a peer-reviewed study in North Dakota, set out to count every child in the state with a pervasive developmental disorder, including autism. That study meticulously combed through every record, every diagnosis, and he even conducted in-person assessments of the entire population of 180,000 children under 18. The autism rate they found was 3.3.
RFK Jr.'s views on the causes of autism are not in line with those of some autism experts. The CDC's website reads, "Many different factors have been identified that may make a child more likely to have ASD, including environmental, biologic, and genetic factors." But Kennedy said, "We have really good genetic markers now, and they provide a vulnerability. But those genetic markers alone are not going to dictate your destiny. You need an environmental toxin. There is a better awareness of autism, but a better awareness cannot be driving a disability of autism to increase by 300% in 20 years. He also used data to prove his point.
In 1987, there was another exhaustive study, a peer-reviewed study in North Dakota, set out to count every child in the state with a pervasive developmental disorder, including autism. That study meticulously combed through every record, every diagnosis, and he even conducted in-person assessments of the entire population of 180,000 children under 18. The autism rate they found was 3.3 per 10,000. So that's in line with the 1 in 10,000 that was found in Wisconsin 17 years earlier. For context, today the last number of 1 in 36 is 83 times higher. In 1987, out of every 1 million kids, 330 were diagnosed with autism. Today, there are 27,777 for every million. If you accept the epidemic denier's narrative, you have to believe that researchers in North Dakota missed 98.8% of the children with autism. That thousands of profoundly disabled children were somehow invisible to doctors, teachers, parents, and even their own study. The same researchers who followed the original cohort for 12 years to double-check their number, they went back in 2000 and found that they had missed exactly one child. So doctors and therapists in the past were not stupid. They weren't missing all these cases. The epidemic is real.
Kennedy revealed that new studies on the environmental causes would be announced in 2 to 3 weeks. He said this has not been done before. Earlier this month, Kennedy announced at a cabinet meeting that a massive new project to identify the causes of the spike in autism has been launched. He said that the causes of autism would be determined by September. New York Attorney General Letitia James has been referred for federal criminal prosecution for alleged mortgage fraud related to a Virginia home and a New York property. William Pulte, the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, wrote a letter to U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi, and he accused Letitia James of mortgage fraud. Pulte alleged that James may have falsified her residence status at a home in Norfolk, Virginia to get a better mortgage rate. Pulte wrote in the letter that James has, in multiple instances, falsified bank documents and property records to acquire government-backed assistance and loans and more favorable loan terms. According to Pulte, in 2023, James granted Shamice Thomas Hairston power of attorney to make the Virginia property her principal residence. This was despite the fact that James is legally required to live and serve as Attorney General in New York at the time. Pulte wrote, at the time of the 2023 Norfolk, Virginia property purchase and mortgage, Miss James was sitting Attorney General of New York and is required by law to have her primary residence in the state of New York, even though her mortgage applications list her intent to have the Norfolk, Virginia property as her primary home. Pulte also alleged that James bought a 5-family property in Brooklyn in 2001 with a loan that is only available for homes with 4 units or less. Pulte wrote, spanning the last 2 decades, Miss James has consistently misrepresented the same property as only having 4 units. In both building permit applications and numerous mortgage documents and applications, it appears that Miss James may have listed the Brooklyn, New York property as 4 units instead of 5 units in order to meet the conforming loan requirements and thus receive better interest rates. It also alleged that James and her father signed mortgage documents in 1983 stating that they were husband and wife. Pulte concluded that this could lead to charges such as wire fraud, mail fraud, and bank fraud, along with making false statements to a financial institution. James's office called the referral political retaliation and said that she wouldn't be intimidated. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember that every like, comment, and share helps more people to see the truth. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you have already subscribed, we thank you, but please double check to make sure that you're still subscribed. because some of our audience have reported that they're somehow unsubscribed without their knowledge. We've also heard that many of you don't get notifications of our videos anymore on YouTube. So when you do subscribe on YouTube, please make sure to tap the notification bell as well. Okay, this is our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, please don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth.